What if I told you the biggest threat to an NBA champion isn't a 7-foot center, but the dude in the suit at Morgan Stanley? We're talking about Darryl Cohen, the financial wizard, who turned the trust of superstars like Jrue Holiday and Chandler Parsons into his personal gold mine. While these guys were bleeding on the court for a ring, Cohen was low-key draining over $5 million from their accounts. He didn't just blow it on Lambos. He used their hard-earned cash to build a luxury basketball court in his own backyard and straight-up bankrolled his mistress's lifestyle. Imagine being a champ like Jrue Holiday, only to find out you donated $500,000 to a ghost charity that actually paid for the advisor's son to have a pro-level gym. Today, I'm breaking down the whole finesse from 310% insurance markups to a secret in-house Ponzi scheme. This is how fame blinds you to the ultimate robbery. No cap. To understand how Darryl Cohen pulled off a heist this massive against people who literally have teams of lawyers and agents guarding them, we have to look at his secret weapon. The perfect mask. See? Cohen didn't start out as some street-level hustler. He was a certified heavyweight in the financial world. We're talking about a guy who spent years grinding at the biggest shops on Wall Street, Merrill Lynch Wells Fargo, and eventually the crown jewel Morgan Stanley. He had the resume, the suits, and the office on the high floor. But Cohen had something most stiff-collared bankers lacked. The vibe. He didn't talk to these players like a boring accountant. He didn't show up with 50-page spreadsheets and talk about diversified portfolios in a way that puts you to sleep. Cohen spoke their language. He understood the culture. He knew that for a 20-year-old kid who just went from eating ramen to signing a $100 million contract, the world is terrifyingly loud. Everyone wants a piece. Everyone has a hand out. Cohen stepped into that chaos as the calm. He positioned himself as the older brother who'd already seen it all. He wasn't just a financial advisor. He was a gatekeeper. He'd tell these guys, "Listen, you focus on the court. You focus on winning rings and staying healthy. Let me handle the noise. I'll pay your bills. I'll handle your taxes. I'll make sure your mom's mortgage is paid on the first of the month, and I'll deal with the IRS, so you never even have to hear their name." This was the birth of his one-stop shop strategy. It sounds like a dream, right? Total convenience. But in the world of high-stakes finance, total convenience is just another word for total control. By taking over the mundane tasks, the utility bills, the car notes, the credit card statements, Cohen did something genius and diabolical. He made himself the only person with the keys to the vault. He made it so the players never had a reason to log into their own bank accounts. Why would you check your balance when Darryl says everything is all good? Why would you look at a bank statement when your credit card never gets declined? He built a wall of trust so thick that it became a blindfold. And let's be real about the psychology here. Most of these NBA stars are coming from backgrounds where they didn't have much. Suddenly, they're thrust into a world of unimaginable wealth. They feel a massive amount of pressure to take care of everyone around them, and that creates an immense amount of decision fatigue. Cohen exploited that fatigue. He became the easy button. But here is the real kicker. He used the Morgan Stanley name as his ultimate shield. When you're an athlete, you're taught to trust the system. You trust the coach, you trust the trainer, and you trust the multi-billion-dollar bank. You think, there's no way a guy at Morgan Stanley is going to trip. They have compliance departments, they have auditors, they have layers of security. You assume that because the logo on the building is famous, the guy inside it must be legitimate. Cohen knew exactly how to leverage that institutional prestige. He wasn't just Darryl. He was Darryl from Morgan Stanley. That title gave him a level of unearned authority that allowed him to bypass the natural skepticism any millionaire should have. He wasn't just managing their money, he was managing their reality. He created a world where the players were the stars on the stage, but he was the one controlling the lights, the sound, and the box office receipts. For nearly a decade, he played this role to perfection. He was the guy at the courtside seats, the guy at the charity galas, the guy who was always a phone call away when a player needed cash for a new jewelry piece or a last-minute flight. He made them feel safe. But behind that protector persona, the predator was already calculating exactly how much he could shave off the top before anyone noticed. He had spent years building the perfect mask, and now he was finally ready to start the finesse of a lifetime. In the league, reputation is everything. It's a small fraternity, a tight-knit circle where everyone knows who's got the best trainer, the best chef, and most importantly, the best guy handling the bag. For Darryl Cohen, the locker room wasn't just a place where games were won. It was his primary sales floor. And his biggest get was a man who is widely considered the gold standard of character in the NBA, Jrue Holiday. When you get a guy like Jrue Holiday to vouch for you, the game is over. Jrue isn't a flash-in-the-pan player. He's a champion, a professional's professional, and a man whose word carries massive weight. By securing Jrue as a client, Cohen didn't just get an account. He got a universal okay to target every other player in the building. It's what we call the locker room effect. If the vet trusts him, the rookies trust him. If the star player lets him handle the mortgage, the role players are going to give him their entire life savings without blinking. Soon, Cohen's roster started looking like an all-star lineup. He brought in Chandler Parsons, a guy who had just signed a massive $94 million contract. He brought in Courtney Lee. He was moving through the league like a virus, jumping from one teammate to the next based on a single handshake and a "he's my guy" recommendation. This is the catalyst phase where a regional advisor turns into a celebrity gatekeeper. But here's where the finesse enters a whole new level of dark. Cohen realized that as long as he kept the players happy and their credit cards working, he could operate in the shadows. He started practicing what the finance world calls selling away. This is the industry term for when an advisor starts peddling investments that aren't actually approved by their firm. In this case, Cohen was selling deals that Morgan Stanley had zero knowledge of. He was using the bank's letterhead and the bank's office to sell private deals that were really just funnels into his own pockets. Think about the psychology of that. You're a player. You walk into a high-rise office with the Morgan Stanley logo on the door. You sit in a leather chair, look at the view of the city, and Darryl tells you about a private exclusive investment opportunity that's only for his top-tier clients. You feel special. You feel like you finally made it to the inner circle. You don't realize that the bank has no idea this investment even exists. To you, the Morgan Stanley brand is a guarantee of safety. To Darryl, it was just a stage prop. He leaned into the lifestyle. He wasn't just some guy in a suit they saw once a quarter. Cohen was outside. He was at the games, sitting courtside, dapping up his clients as they headed to the tunnel. He was at the charity galas. He was the guy you called at 2 a.m. when you wanted to buy a custom chain or needed a wire transfer for a new car. By becoming their best friend, he removed the one thing that keeps advisors honest professional boundaries. When your advisor is your brother, you don't ask for receipts. You don't ask for independent audits. You don't ask why your account balance seems a little light this month. You just assume Big Bro has it under control. This social engineering was brilliant. Cohen knew that these athletes were constantly being hounded by yes men and leeches. He positioned himself as the only one who wasn't a leech. He made it look like he was the one protecting them from the world. He'd tell them, "Watch out for that guy, he's just after your money," while he was literally the one with his hand in the jar. He created an environment where the players felt like it was them and Darryl against everyone else. Once he had that level of psychological lock-in, the expansion was effortless. He didn't have to hunt for clients. They came to him. He was the NBA advisor. He had the clout, he had the credentials, and he had the most respected names in the sport backing him up. He had successfully turned the locker room into a private hunting ground. The trap was set, the trust was absolute, and the players were too busy chasing championships to notice that their protector was about to orchestrate the biggest robbery of their lives. He had the institutional shield of Morgan Stanley in one hand and the personal vouchers of NBA royalty in the other. He was untouchable, or so he thought. No cap the level of confidence it takes to look a man in the eye while you're building a backyard basketball court with his stolen money is some next-level villainy. And the wildest part. The show was only just beginning. All right, everyone. It's time to take a closer look at what may be one of the biggest financial betrayals in modern sports. After digging through FBI files, SEC complaints, and internal Morgan Stanley memos, what emerges looks like far more than a simple mistake. It looks like a case study in financial manipulation. Cohen wasn't just taking a cut on the side. He appeared to be stripping the operation for value and leaving the owners to absorb the damage. Let's talk about the first and most diabolical tool in his kit, the viatical settlement scam. Now, viatical settlement sounds like some boring high-level Wall Street jargon, right? That's exactly why Cohen used it. He knew that if he used words that sounded complicated, the players would just nod, trust his expertise, and move on to the next play. But let me break it down in plain English. A viatical settlement is when you buy the life insurance policy of someone who is terminally ill. You pay them a lump sum now so they can have cash for their final days, and when they pass away, you collect the full death benefit. It's a legitimate, albeit somewhat morbid investment. But Cohen and his partner in crime, a shady independent accountant named Brian Gilder, turned this into a pure markup machine. Here is the math that will make your stomach turn. Cohen would convince his NBA clients guys, like Jrue Holiday, that they needed to diversify their wealth into these exclusive insurance deals. He'd tell them it was a guaranteed win. But behind the scenes, Cohen and Gilder were buying these policies through shell companies they controlled. Let's look at the receipts. In one specific case, they bought a policy for about $460,000. That's the real market value. But when they sold it to the players, they charged them over $1.5 million. Do the math with me, gang. That is a 310% markup. No cap. In the world of legitimate finance, a standard commission might be 1% or 2%. Cohen was charging over 300%. He was literally walking away with an extra $1 million on a single transaction, and the players had no idea because the paperwork Cohen provided was all internally generated and scrubbed of the real purchase price. He was selling them a Honda Civic for the price of a Ferrari and pocketing the difference to fund his own lifestyle. This wasn't investing. It was a highway robbery with a signature line. And then we get to the most cold-blooded part of the whole operation, the Beast Basketball Ghost Charity. This one hits different because it preys on the players' desire to give back to the community. Most of these NBA stars come from nothing, and they take it as a point of pride to help the next generation. Cohen knew that. He sat down with his clients and pitched them on a noble cause, a non-profit called Beast Basketball. He told them the money would go toward training underprivileged kids, providing sneakers, and giving the next Jrue Holiday a chance to make it out of the hood. Of course, the players said yes. They authorized hundreds of thousands of dollars in donations. Jrue Holiday alone saw roughly $500,000 leave his account for this cause. But if you went looking for Beast Basketball, you wouldn't find a community center in the inner city. You wouldn't find a roster of kids getting scholarships. Instead, If you drove to Darryl Cohen's million-dollar mansion in California and walked into the backyard, you'd find exactly where that money went. Cohen used $238,000 of the players' charity money to build a pro-level state-of-the-art basketball court and a private luxury gym right behind his house. Think about the level of audacity that takes. You steal $500,000 from a man who spent his life grinding in gyms to make it pro. You tell him the money is helping poor kids, and then you use that cash to build a private court for your own son to practice on. He literally built a monument to his own greed in his backyard using the stolen sweat of NBA champions. When the players would ask for updates, Cohen would send them generic photos of kids playing ball or tell them the program is growing. He used their moral compass as a roadmap to their bank accounts. He knew they wouldn't audit a charity because in their minds you don't double-check a good deed. That was his biggest finesse, making the robbery look like a blessing. But we're only halfway through the engine, gang. These were just the first 2 gears. The next 2 Chiutra are where things get even messier, involving secret lovers, credit card fraud, and an internal Ponzi scheme that would make Bernie Madoff blush. Now, if you thought building a private basketball court with stolen charity money was the peak of the finesse, buckle up, because we're going into the dark heart of the operation. This is where Cohen's house of cards started to lean, and he had to get creative just to keep the lights on. Let's talk about Mechanism 3, the in-house Ponzi scheme. This is the classic robbing Peter to pay Paul strategy, but with a high-stakes multi-million-dollar twist. See, every scammer eventually runs into a problem client, someone who actually pays attention, someone who asks for an audit, or someone who just notices the math isn't mathing. For Cohen, that problem was a retired MLB player named Morgan. Niger wasn't playing around. He started noticing gaps in his accounts and began making some very loud noise. He wanted his money, and he wanted it now. Cohen was cornered. He didn't have the cash to pay Niger back because he'd already blown it on his lifestyle and his backyard stadium. So, what does a trusted Morgan Stanley advisor do? He looks at his roster for the biggest whale who isn't looking at his statements. That whale was Chandler Parsons. While Chandler was out there grinding on the court, Cohen reached into Chandler's account and snatched $328,000 in one cold-blooded move. He didn't invest it. He didn't move it to a high-yield account. He literally wired it straight to Morgan to shut him up. Think about the sheer audacity of that. He used one client's hard-earned money to pay off another client he'd already robbed. This is a Ponzi scheme running entirely within the walls of a single advisor's office at Morgan Stanley. He was playing a high-stakes game of musical chairs with millions of dollars, hoping the music would never stop. He bet on the fact that these players were too busy, too tired, or too trusting to ever cross-reference their accounts. It was a gamble that worked for years, but it showed exactly how desperate and depraved the operation had become. He wasn't just a thief anymore. He was a full-blown financial acrobat, flipping stolen money through the air just to keep his secret from exploding. But we have to talk about the part that really stings, the part that turns this from a financial crime into a personal betrayal. Mechanism 4. The romantic payoff and the personal piggy bank. This is where the brotherhood Cohen preached to his clients officially died. While Cohen was telling these players he was their protector, he was using their bank accounts like his own personal American Express black card. According to the FBI and the SEC, Cohen used client funds to pay off his own massive credit card debts and even his home pool repair bills. Imagine being Courtney Lee or Jrue Holiday risking a career-ending injury every night, while your brother, Darryl, is using your money to fix the heater in his pool so his water stays a crisp 80 degrees. But it gets even messier. The investigation uncovered that Cohen funneled over $200,000 of stolen client money directly to his romantic partner. We're talking about cash transfers, luxury gifts, and funding a double life all on the player's dime. He was taking the blood, sweat, and tears of NBA champions men who literally leave their health on the hardwood every night and using it to play sugar daddy to his mistress. He didn't stop there. He was also using their accounts to pay for his personal attorneys and shady consulting fees to his partner Gilder. He had created a system where the players were unknowingly subsidizing every single aspect of his life, from his house to his hobbies to his romantic flings. He wasn't just managing their money, he was living through it. The genius of this part of the finesse was the small ball approach. Cohen knew that if he stole $10 million in one day, alarms would go off. But if he skimmed $20,000 here for a credit card bill, $50,000 there for a mistress wire, and $100,000 for pool repairs, it would just look like miscellaneous expenses in the sea of millions that these stars generate. He relied on the fact that when you're making $30 million a year, you don't notice a $20,000 glitch. But those glitches add up. Over 3 years, these small thefts turned into a $5 million mountain of fraud. Cohen had effectively turned his clients into human ATM machines that never asked for a receipt. He played on their generosity, their lack of financial literacy, and their desire for a hassle-free life to fund a lifestyle he could never have afforded on his own. This wasn't just a breakdown in banking, it was a total breakdown in humanity. Cohen sat at their dinner tables, he met their families, and he looked them in the eye while he was wiring their children's inheritance to his lover. That is the true mechanism under the hood, a complete and utter lack of shame. Cohen didn't just steal their money, he stole their security, their trust, and the peace of mind that comes with knowing your future is safe. And the wildest part, he almost got away with it. If it wasn't for one minor detail in a country club application, we might still be calling Darryl Cohen the king of NBA advisors today. No cap. Every criminal thinks they're the smartest guy in the room until they trip over a shoelace. For Darryl Cohen, that shoelace was a high-end country club application. See, when you're a multi-millionaire athlete trying to join an exclusive club, they don't just look at your golf swing, they vet your character. They look at your tax returns, your community involvement, and your charitable giving. In 2021, of Cohen's top clients, a man who thought Darryl was his ride or die submitted his paperwork for membership. The club's committee looked at his records and said, "Wow, $500,000 to Beast Basketball, that's some incredible generosity." The player froze. He didn't know what Beast Basketball was. He'd never authorized a $500,000 wire to a youth program. He called his legal team, and that was the first crack in the dam. Once the lawyers started pulling that thread, the whole $5 million tapestry of lies came unraveled in record time. The proof wasn't just a few missing decimals. It was a mountain of forensic evidence that the FBI and the SEC spent years climbing. When the feds finally got a warrant for Cohen's devices, they found the smoking gun in his encrypted messages. We're talking about cold-blooded conversations between Cohen and his partner Brian Gilder, where they literally joked about their clients. In the world of these scammers, the NBA champions weren't legends or friends. They were sheep waiting to be sheared. The messages detailed exactly how they'd inflate the insurance prices, how they'd hide the kickbacks, and how they'd move money between accounts to put out fires whenever a client got suspicious. They even found the receipts for the backyard basketball court. It wasn't a community center. For the hood, the invoices were addressed to Cohen's personal residence. Every brick, every hoop, every square inch of that hardwood was paid for with a direct wire from a player who thought he was helping kids. The documentation showed a 1-to-1 correlation. A donation leaves a player's account, and 48 hours later, a contractor gets paid to install luxury lighting in Darryl's backyard. But let's talk about the impact because the numbers on a spreadsheet don't tell the full story. The media likes to frame this as rich guys losing money they won't miss, but that is a straight-up lie. The average NBA career is only about 4.5 years. These guys have a tiny window to earn enough money to support their families, their parents, and their kids for the next 50 years. When you steal $5 million from a player, you aren't just taking extra cash, you are stealing their retirement. You are stealing the nest egg that was supposed to fund their transition into life after the league. The psychological impact is even worse. Imagine the trauma of realizing that the man you invited to your wedding, the man who knew your children's names, the man you trusted to protect your legacy, was actually the one finessing you every single day for 3 years. It creates a level of paranoia that ruins future business relationships. These players worked their entire lives to get out of the hood, to escape the leeches and the scammers, only to find the biggest shark of them all was wearing a Morgan Stanley blazer. The fallout hit Morgan Stanley hard too. They had to settle with the players for millions, but the damage to their reputation in the sports world was done. The impact is a permanent stain on the industry. It proved that even at a top-tier firm, a rogue advisor can turn a safe account into a personal piggy bank if the oversight is lazy. Jrue Holiday, Chandler. Parsons, Courtney Lee. They got some of their money back, but they'll never get back that sense of security. They'll never get back the years of brotherhood they thought they had with a man who was actually their worst enemy. The impact isn't just the $5 million loss, it's the realization that in the high-stakes world of NBA wealth, the most dangerous person in the room isn't the one defending you on the court, it's the one managing you off of it. So, let's address the $5 million question. How did a group of elite, world-class athletes, men who have to be hyper-aware of every move on a basketball court, become so completely finessable in a boardroom? It wasn't because they were dumb or lazy. It was because Darryl Cohen was a master of psychological engineering. He didn't just study their bank accounts, he studied their insecurities. The first tactical play in his playbook was the financial literacy gap. Real talk, most NBA stars are young men who grew up with nothing, spent their entire lives mastering a physical craft, and were suddenly handed a generational fortune at age 20. They are the top 1% in the world at putting a ball in a hoop, but they've never been taught how to read a 10K or verify a viatical settlement. Cohen knew that decision fatigue is real. When you're dealing with the pressure of a game-winning shot and 100 million people watching you, the last thing you want to do is come home and audit your utility bills. Cohen offered the easy button. He made himself so essential that questioning him felt like questioning your own hands. Then there's the institutional gaslighting. Cohen didn't just use the Morgan Stanley name, he weaponized it. In the corporate world, we're taught that big brands mean safety. Cohen relied on the players' assumption that the bank wouldn't let this happen. He used the prestige of a global firm to silence any natural skepticism. If a player saw something weird on a statement, Cohen would pivot to the exclusive narrative. This is a private deal only for the A-list. The standard bank systems don't even show this level of play. He made them feel like they were in a VIP lounge when they were actually in a slaughterhouse. But the most cold-blooded tactic was the weaponization of loyalty. In the NBA, loyalty is the currency of the locker room. You don't snitch, you don't doubt your teammates, and you ride for the guys who ride for you. Cohen didn't position himself as a banker. He positioned himself as family. He sat at their tables, he knew their kids, and he became the big bro who handled the boring stuff. Once you've invited someone into your inner circle, your brain literally stops looking for red flags. It's called confirmation bias. The players wanted to believe Cohen was the one honest guy in a world of leeches. He told them exactly what they wanted to hear. Everyone else is out to get you, but I'm the one protecting the bag. He isolated them from other advisors by being the only trusted source of information. Cohen wasn't just a thief, he was a psychological hacker. He found the back door into their trust by exploiting their desire for a simple life and their ingrained sense of loyalty. He knew that in the high-stakes world of pro sports, the loudest person in the room gets the attention, so he stayed quiet, stayed brotherly, and stayed in their pockets for years. That is how you finesse $5 million not with a gun, but with a handshake and a no-cap promise to always have their back. By March 2026, the legal hammer finally dropped. Darryl Cohen was found guilty on counts of wire fraud and investment advisor fraud. We're talking about a potential 20-year stretch in federal prison. The king of NBA advisors traded his courtside seats for a courtroom bench and eventually a prison cell. Morgan Stanley had to fork over millions in settlements to Jrue, Holiday, Chandler, Parsons, and the others, but the real cost was the total destruction of a brotherhood. Cohen's legacy isn't a backyard stadium anymore. It's a cautionary tale etched into the history of Wall Street. But look, gang, this isn't just a story about some rich guys losing money. This is a blueprint of how a finesse works in the real world, and there are some cold-blooded lessons here that apply to all of us, whether you have $5 million in the bank or $5. Lesson 1. Knowledge is your only real bodyguard. You don't need to be a CPA, but you cannot afford to be financially illiterate. Decision fatigue is real, but outsourcing your thinking is the fastest way to get robbed. If you don't take the time to manage your money, someone else will, and they'll manage it right into their own pocket. You have to know enough to ask the annoying questions. If your advisor gets defensive when you ask for a receipt that's not professionalism, that's a red flag the size of a billboard. Lesson 2. The one-stop shop is a trap. Cohen's biggest win was becoming the only person the players talked to. He was the banker, the accountant, and the bill payer. In the world of real power, we call this a lack of checks and balances. You should never have one person holding the bag and the key at the same time. Your accountant should be independent of your financial advisor. Your lawyer should be independent of both. When you decentralize your authority, you make it 10 times harder for a single bad actor to finesse you. Lesson 3. Beware the private deal lure. Scammers love to make you feel like a VIP. They use words like exclusive, private, or off-platform. If your advisor tells you about an investment that doesn't show up on your official bank portal run. Selling away is one of the most common ways people get scammed at big firms. They use the firm's logo to build trust, but they move the money into a dark alley where the firm's auditors can't see it. If it's not on the dashboard, it's not a deal. It's a heist. Lesson 4. Trust is earned, but verification is required. Reagan said, "Trust but verify," but in 2026, we say verify first, then maybe trust. Never rely on a spreadsheet your advisor sent you. Always log into the primary source. Check the original bank statements. Call the firm's compliance department. If Darryl Cohen's clients had spent 30 minutes once a month looking at their raw transaction history, he never would have made it past the first 6 months. Lesson 5. Redefine loyalty. In the streets and in the league, loyalty is everything. But in business, loyalty is a contract, not a feeling. Don't let someone big bro you into giving up your financial sovereignty. Real loyalty from a professional is transparency. If they love you like family, they'll show you the receipts like a stranger. At the end of the day, Darryl Cohen didn't just steal $5 million. He stole the peace of mind of men who worked their whole lives to be free. Don't let your success become your blind spot. Keep your eyes on the ball, but keep your hands on the bag. So, what do you think? Should Morgan Stanley have caught this sooner, or is it on the players to watch their own back? Drop a comment below. And remember, the most expensive thing you can ever own is a trusted friend who doesn't show you the math.